Welcome back. You're watching Hume and O'Neill with Jane Hume and Kimberly Kitching. Of course, still filling in for Claire O'Neill. Well, the US decided not to send officials to next year's Beijing Winter Olympics. It's over human rights abuses that put the pressure on Australia to follow suit. Here's how that particular issue unfolded this week.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics.
The Chinese government has consistently not accepted those opportunities for us to meet about these issues.
And it's a decision of the government if they wish to attend, and I guess the politics of this is for them.
Australia and the world stand on China has changed significantly in the last few years, and I believe that we do need to stand up to them for sure.
China has not invited any Australian government officials to attend the Winter Olympics, and no one would care about whether they come or not.
So the intriguing thing about this for many was the timing, Jane. Australia went second here, but waited a day or two. It would have had safety in numbers, perhaps avoided more of the Chinese wrath. Why not wait a couple of days?
Well, I don't think it was a surprise to anybody, this announcement. It had always been considered. Australia has made it very clear that we have some really significant issues with the human rights abuses that are going on in China. We've been consistent about that message for a really long period of time now, and that we've also had trouble engaging with China on some really important issues. And we would like them to reach out. We've said that the door is always open. We're always on the other end of a phone. If they want to discuss any of those issues with which they have grievances, and we've seen the list of 14 grievances that they've prepared, things like our foreign interference laws, our foreign relations laws that prevent, give the Commonwealth the power of veto over investments, arrangements made between the states and local governments in China, the human rights abuses in Xinjiang province, and also even something as basic as Huawei's investment in 5G in Australia. Now, these are decisions that we've made with Australia's interests in mind first and foremost. And if China have a problem with them, all they need to do is reach out and pick up a phone to discuss that with us. But doing it over the media is not something that we're interested in doing. But that said, this is a very consistent decision to not send Australian diplomats to the Beijing Olympics. But certainly our athletes will be well supported.
So, Kimberly, it brings us to the question, I suppose. The Labor supported this move. Do you have any issue with how this particular move, if you like, or decision was announced, decided upon, and so on?
I mean, when's the right time to call out human rights abuses? Human rights abuses anywhere make all of us poorer. And America went first, but Canada has joined, the UK, Lithuania, New Zealand's not attending for COVID reasons, but they're not sending anyone either, any diplomats either. And I think that this is a good decision. We are in our countries, the countries I've just listed, we believe in human rights. We believe that in the rights of minorities, we protect those rights. And we have to, because otherwise we wouldn't have a democracy. People wouldn't be valued. And I think what's happening in Xinjiang, including forced sterilisation, including sexual slavery, forced labour. I mean, these are terrible, terrible conditions, terrible things to do to human beings. And I just don't think we can condone it at all. And overnight, there was a People's Tribunal in the UK run by Geoffrey Nice, a British barrister, and they found that China had committed these abuses. Now, China, of course, has said that the People's Tribunal was just doing it for self-entertainment. But, I mean, people in the countries that are diplomatically boycotting these Winter Olympics are concerned about human rights abuses. And, I think that no matter where they occur, it affects all of us. And this diplomatic boycott is a way of not punishing athletes. So athletes who've worked very hard for years to do all that training, it doesn't affect them. They can still go to compete. But it is a way of a country and a government, and both parties of government, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, have agreed on this.
The interesting thing about this as well is Labor
bipartisan
says
support for the decision has been really important.
Yeah.
That bipartisan approach.
Right. What's not bipartisan, according to Labor, is sort of how you approach the relationship, how some decisions are announced, perhaps. So Labor says it will improve the relationship if it gets into power. If that happens, Kimberley Kitching, you'll be seen as a member of the government by the Chinese Communist Party. If you make the sort of comments you've just made, I'm not saying they're wrong, I'm just saying if you make them, they'll use that as an example of the Australian government speaking out and demonise the Australian government. Are you going to stop making those sorts of comments?
Tom, I do not think there is a member of federal parliament, not one, who condones human rights abuses. Not one of our colleagues who would condone those abuses.
But isn't it true that
there is no question they are going to have to. They are going to have to. The Chinese Communist Party is going to have to accept that a number of democratic countries, in fact, all democratic countries, are not going to condone human rights abuses. So that's just the fact. No one is going to condone that.
Are they at the moment?
So the fact is...
They're not accepting that at the moment, are they?
Well, that's the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, we actually only hear really from the Chinese Communist Party, but I'm very aware that when Chinese families have an opportunity to send their children overseas to university, for example, I mean, we only had to look at last year when some places were opened up. Those Chinese families sent their children back to do quarantine in the Northern Territory and back into Australia so they could be educated here. We hear from the Chinese Communist Party. And what I'm saying is that there are Chinese families and Chinese people who very much like the West and like having their children in a liberal democracy.
Yeah, and I guess the point there is that will the relationship actually heal with a different party if we're going to continue to talk out? Again, I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying, Labor's call about fixing the relationship might be a tough one.
But what about Hong Kong?
Yeah.
What about Hong Kong? What about the flyovers in Taiwan? Now...
But what I'm saying, Kimberley, is what Anthony Albanese has said about we'll take a tough stance, but we'll just be a bit nicer about it, be more diplomatic. Is that realistic?
I think that the Chinese Communist Party, as Jane has spoken about, is the 14 grievances. I just think that no government of whatever flavour is going to accept, for example, in those list of 14 grievances, that the media can't write critical stories of China. I mean, we have a free press. We have freedom of the press for the very important reason that it helps our democracy.
We're nearly out of time.
I think Kimberley's right. We'll never be able to adhere to those 14 grievances, and that is something that we have taken a bipartisan approach towards. It's more important that Australia acts in its national interest at every step in the way, rather than kowtowing to a larger and a very noisy nation for the sake of sending diplomats to a Winter Olympics.